CBD Jazz cigarettes. Just became a member through the app. Shofar, please. You got it. It's been a while since Please make the Vitali interview available ASAP. I need talking points for discussing defunding the police with fellow rural Utahns. It'll be podcasts in, I don't know, 3 hours less.
My cousin, actually, one of my cousins asked me for some defund the police background, but he's prefaced it with, I don't want to get political. And I think that's where a lot of people are. Like they recognize a huge problem here. And I think Vitali, I think his approach is great.
Yes. I think honestly, this is why I keep talking about it as a, excuse me. This is why I keep talking about it in the context of efficiency and in the idea of we have put too much burden on police to deal with societal ills that they are not equipped to deal with. So, have other municipal departments that are better suited and experts in these areas deal with issues like people who are not housed, like opioid addiction, and then decriminalize, which I think a lot of people there's a lot more of an appetite for that than there was, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. Decriminalize as much as you can that doesn't involve people getting hurt, and make it about just efficiency. And that's why, like I say, disinvest sounds like it's an infrastructure project. We're not going to invest in fossil fuels. We're going to invest in renewable energy. And in this instance, it's we're not going to invest in a mechanism to deal with problems that we deal with in cities and towns across the country that has shown that it's not really built for that. And that is a very sort of non-ideological way to present this to people, where it's just this is common sense. We wouldn't say to the Department of Public Works, hey, you guys are in charge of dealing with homelessness now. That would not work out very well if their building inspectors went around and were in charge of homeless people. But we give it to the cops because violence is not necessarily the most efficient and healthy response to everything, but violence can be a response to everything. I mean, it really can be. It is the one thing, you got a problem, beat the hell out of that person, problem goes away. Well, it creates a ripple effect of other problems, but the immediate one goes away. So
it's also a question of what kind of society do you want to live in? Maybe this will work better on liberals than on conservatives, but you can appeal to someone's basic humanity by saying, even if violence did solve these problems, which it absolutely does not, do you want to live in a world where people are beaten by the violent arm of the state and treated like they're less than human because they're working class, because they're poor, because they're non-white? Or do you want to live in a world where everyone has a chance at living a decent life? This is part of that.
Here is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey saying that he would not, and see, again, listen to the question and then his response. So it's a little bit there's a little bit of room, and I do think that there is value. Again, like I said, I think, James made the point that these arguments are made in the abolition framework, but I don't necessarily think that you need to, it's another one of those situations where the highway is headed in a certain direction, and a lot of the off-ramps are very helpful along the way. There are some, ideologies and some ideas where you head down that direction and every single off-ramp is a hellscape until you get to, some end goal. I happen to think that a lot of the off-ramps on the way full abolition is very helpful. And you don't necessarily have to advertise it as full abolition, because listen to this exchange.
Jacob Frey, we have a yes or no question for you. Yes or no, will you commit to defunding Minneapolis Police Department?
Abolition of it?
What did I say? We don't want no more police.
No
Is
more.
that clear? We don't want people with guns toting around in our community, shooting us down. You have an answer? It is a yes or a no. It is a yes or a no. Will you defund the Minneapolis Police Department? All right, be quiet, y'all. Be quiet, because it's important that we actually hear this. It's important that we hear this, because if y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. If y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. And if he says no, guess what the we gonna do next year? Louder, one more time.
Loud and clear.
Louder.
I do not support full abolition. All right.
Loud.
You're wasting our time. Get out of here. Get out. Go home, Jacob. Go home. 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 Go home, Jacob. Go home.
That's people power.
Tough day to be the mayor.
This makes me miss The Office, when we would do this to each other when someone had a bad opinion.
Go home, Michael. Go home.
I mean, I think, like, look, I have to say, I look at that, and there is, I am comfortable with everybody's role in that scenario. I don't think that, I don't think the idea of full abolition of the police is something that you sign off to today. I think, defunding is one thing. Full abolition is another.
It's interesting that he pushed it from, the question was about defunding, and he rephrased it in terms of abolition.
Right.
And that's actually why I preferred, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, like, I think defunding is the way to Trojan horse abolitionist framework into people, which is why I actually prefer it to the disinvestment.
I think he said, I mean, he could have said, I'm for defunding, and
right.
And been okay at that point, and then later said, by defunding, I mean, like, I want to cut the budget.
Right.
I want to,
That's true.
But
so he was actually forthright about it, actually.
To his credit. I mean, honestly, to his credit, he said, I can't support full abolition of the police department, but defunding is,
at least he didn't pretend.
Some wiggle room, and good for him for being explicit, and good for the protesters for pushing this guy as far as you can be pushed. I mean, I think, like I say, that was a tough walk he had, but I'm sure he'll be fine.
More mayors should be in that position. I think that's a sign of a healthy democracy right there.
Definitely. Like, you got to give the guy credit for being there, for giving a straight answer. Like, every other politician that you see in a major city, I think, would have said, and I don't want to, I'm not heaping praise on this guy, but I'm just saying, in that moment, would have said, I am for defunding the police department. And they would have walked out of the crowd to massive cheers. And then they would have issued a release saying, like, the mayor stands by his words. He is looking at a 0.75% reduction in police budget for 2022, fiscal 2022, coupled with, of course, an increase in blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the way they would have done that. But that's why I think everybody in that situation functioned exactly like they should. We should be pushing our politicians. We should be pushing, and the bar should be one that they can barely actually meet at any point.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too broad with it, but like, total abolition of the police is not something that an elected official who is part of the state really can sign on to, right? Because this is connected to all other issues. I don't know any abolitionists who also want to leave capitalism standing, it really requires not just a rethinking of how we deal with harm in our society, but a total rethinking of how society is ordered. And that's what's good about it. It points in all these other directions. But that's expecting a lot from an elected official. And they can't take us all the way there. The bourgeois state cannot abolish itself, they cannot abolish the institution that upholds private property and the bourgeois state. I mean, we've got some socialist elected officials like here in New York, but not that many of them. And it is like a fundamental conflict at the end of the day.
And I think the reality is that if you take these steps that Vitaly was talking about in the, near to midterm, decouple responsibility for dealing with people who are unhoused, decouple responsibility for policing drug use, decouple responsibility for policing sex work, and more off the top of my head, I can't remember, but, and then you see where you're at. And then you see what is working, what is not working. I mean, this is,
and the playing field will be much better at that point too.
Without a doubt. And you'll have examples of stuff like, hey, this works a lot. This doesn't work. Maybe we need to make this slight change. And you're going to have more ability to actually affect that change, because as you're going, you're also slowing the power. I mean, decreasing the power of that institution because you're decreasing their resources.
Yeah.
And you're decreasing the reliance that is perceived, that people have a perception of how much we rely on these people.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, a long-term goal like abolition, a long-term goal like socialism, elected officials can get us part of the way there. They can play a role, maybe, but it's up to the people to take it the rest of the way.